On the rugged alien planet of Zareth, the sun beat down harshly, casting long shadows over the barren desert landscape. The ground was cracked and dry, the air thick with heat. This was a world where few could survive without the proper strength and skill, a world where only the toughest endured. It was here, amidst the harshness of Zaroth, that Zarnath, a towering, muscular alien warrior, had been given a task. Zarnath belonged to the Vreen, an advanced species known for their strength, speed, and ruthless nature. Their civilization had thrived for millennia, conquering and ruling over many worlds. But now Zarnath's mission was simple: eliminate the threat posed by a lone human, Jax, who had somehow survived on Zareth. Despite the many attempts on his life, he had eluded capture, making him a target of curiosity and disdain among the Vreen. The Vreen had never respected humans. To them they were weak, fragile, and primitive. Yet, this one human was an enigma, an unexpected survivor in a hostile world. Zarnath's boots crunched over the dry earth as she moved swiftly through the canyon. The wind whispered in the distance, but there was no one around. She had tracked Jax for days, following his trail across the desert and through the rocky cliffs. He had made no attempt to hide his presence, as if he knew she would come for him, yet he had always managed to stay one step ahead. Zarnath could feel the hum of her pulse rifle against her back, its presence comforting. Her green skin shimmered under the harsh sunlight, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the landscape. Every muscle in her body prepared for a fight. She had crossed paths with countless species in her life, but never had she encountered a human quite like Jax. For the past few days, Zarnath had been growing increasingly frustrated. Every time she thought she was closing in, Jax would vanish without a trace. She knew this was no accident. He was intelligent, resourceful, and had a knack for surviving against all odds. That alone made him dangerous, but it also made him interesting. She paused for a moment, resting on a rock, her keen senses picking up a subtle sound, a faint rustle of sand shifting. It was the sound of someone moving, someone trying to remain silent. Zarnath's lips curled into a grin. This was it. She had him. Silently, she moved forward, her senses alive with anticipation. As she approached the top of a cliff, she saw him. Jax stood at the edge of a canyon, looking out over the vast landscape. He seemed calm, unfazed by the looming presence of the Vreen warrior behind him. In fact, he didn't even seem to notice her at first. Zarnath observed him closely. His clothes were ragged, torn from days of travel through the desert, and yet he looked strangely at peace. His face, though weathered, held an air of quiet confidence. He was tall, with short brown hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her, as though he knew exactly who she was. He was nothing like the Vreen. His body was lean, without the physical power she possessed, but there was something in his posture, something in his presence, that was unsettling. Jax turned slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them seemed charged, filled with a tension that neither could ignore. "You're the one they sent to kill me?" Jax asked, his voice calm, almost amused. Zarnath stared at him, her hand instinctively resting on the hilt of her weapon. She had been sent to eliminate him, to make sure that he would no longer be a problem for the Vreen. Yet here he was, standing before her, unafraid and almost welcoming in his manner. "I was sent to do what needs to be done," Zarnath replied, her voice cold and authoritative. "And what needs to be done is your death, human." Jax gave a soft chuckle, his smile slightly crooked, as if the entire situation amused him. "Is that so? You really think you can kill me?" Zarnath's muscles tensed, but she didn't draw her weapon yet. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "You're a fool to think you can outsmart me. The Vreen don't lose." Jax didn't move. "I'm not trying to outsmart you." "Then what are you doing?" Zarnath asked, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. Jax shrugged. "I'm just waiting." "I knew you would come. but I'm not running anymore." For the first time, Zarnath felt something unexpected, a sense of curiosity. Why wasn't he running? Why wasn't he fighting back, as every other being would? She had never encountered a prey so composed. Most would cower in fear, beg for mercy, or try to escape. But Jax stood tall, unwavering, almost as if he didn't fear her at all. "You are different," Zarnath said, her voice tinged with both curiosity and something else she couldn't quite place. "Most would be terrified by the sight of me, but not you." "Why would I be?" Jax replied, his voice still calm. "You're not the first person to come after me. You won't be the last, either." "But I'm still here." Zarnath blinked in surprise. What kind of human was this? She had encountered many before, and none had ever spoken to her in this way. They were usually terrified, pleading for their lives. But Jax didn't show any fear at all. He spoke as if he were already certain of his fate, and it unsettled her more than she cared to admit. "You think you can survive me?" she asked, her voice laced with a challenge. "You think you can survive the Vreen?" "I know I can survive you," Jax answered confidently. "I've survived worse." Zarnath's hand gripped her rifle tighter, her eyes locked on his. She had expected him to fight, to resist, but here he was, standing before her with a calm that bordered on arrogance. This wasn't a typical human. This was something different. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "What makes you think you can survive me?" she demanded, her voice a low growl. Jax didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer to her, his expression softening. "Because I've seen the world differently than you." Zarnath's heart skipped a beat. She had not expected such words from a human, and she couldn't quite understand them. But the look in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice, struck something deep inside her. "I don't understand you, human," Zarnath muttered, more to herself than to him. "That's okay," Jax replied with a smile. "Most people don't understand me." Zarnath stood still for a moment, her eyes narrowing in contemplation. This was not the way she had envisioned this moment. This was not what she had been trained to expect from the humans she had been taught to despise. She had expected fear, panic, or resistance. Instead, she found something far more unsettling: calm, acceptance, and something that felt a lot like respect. Her fingers relaxed around the grip of her weapon, but she didn't lower it. Not yet. Jax, sensing her hesitation, spoke once more, his tone still gentle. "I don't want to fight you." Zarnath's brow furrowed in confusion. Why? She had hunted countless beings, and none had ever offered such a peaceful resolution. They either fought or fled. But this human seemed different. "Why are you not afraid of me?" Zarnath finally asked. Jax's smile widened. "I've seen death before. It doesn't scare me." The words lingered in the air between them, heavy and meaningful. Zarnath didn't know what to make of them. She had been sent here to kill him, but now, standing before him, she felt something she couldn't explain, a strange sense of doubt, a flicker of curiosity about this human and what he represented. And so, for the first time in her life, Zarnath hesitated. A decision had to be made, but which path would she choose? The path of death, as she had been trained, or something else entirely, something that only this human could offer? Zarnath stood still, her eyes locked onto Jax, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't quite understand. The human before her, so calm, so at peace, was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Every instinct screamed at her to do what she had been trained to do, to strike and eliminate the threat. But for the first time in her life, she found herself questioning everything. She had been sent to kill him, to end the life of this human who had caused so much trouble on her planet. The Vreen did not show mercy. Mercy was weakness, and weakness was something the Vreen had long since eliminated from their society. Strength and power were all that mattered. Yet here, in front of her, was a human who defied every expectation. He wasn't afraid. He didn't cower or plead for his life. Instead, he stood before her, with the calm certainty of someone who had already accepted their fate. Zarnath felt a strange sensation twist in her chest, a feeling she had never experienced. It was as if the very air around her had shifted. For a moment, she almost couldn't breathe. "You still haven't answered my question," Jack said, breaking her train of thought. Zarnath blinked, snapping out of her reverie. "What question?" "Why do you want to kill me?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. Zarnath's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening once more around the pulse rifle at her side. "It's not about what I want," she said. "It's what I've been commanded to do." Jax tilted his head slightly, considering her words. "And what if you didn't have to follow those orders? What if you could choose something else?" Zarnath stiffened. "I don't have a choice," she replied. "I am a soldier. We follow orders. It's what we do." Jax's expression softened, and for a moment he almost looked sad. "That's the thing about being a soldier, isn't it? You follow orders without questioning them. But what if those orders are wrong?" Zarnath felt something stir inside her, a flicker of doubt that she quickly buried. She had always followed orders, always been a warrior. It was the only life she had ever known. But now in front of her was a human who was making her question everything. How could one person, one human, make her feel this way? "I don't know," Zarnath said, her voice softer than she intended. "I've never questioned it before." Jack smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time to start." For a moment, the two of them stood there in silence, the harsh winds of Zareth howling in the distance. Zarnath's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She was supposed to kill him. It was her mission, her duty. But something about Jax made that mission feel wrong. She had never felt like this before, and it scared her. "You're not like the others," Zarnath said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jax looked at her, his eyes steady. "And you're not like what I thought you'd be, either." Zarnath raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that?" "I thought you'd be like all the other soldiers I've faced," Jax explained. "Cold, ruthless, without a second thought. But you're different. You're unsure." Zarnath's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't remember the last time someone had seen through her so easily. For all her strength, all her training, she had never been this vulnerable. Jax wasn't afraid of her, and yet he was breaking down the walls she had built around herself. "I'm not unsure," she snapped, trying to regain control. "I'm just doing my job." But Jax wasn't intimidated. He stepped closer to her, his calm presence unnerving. "Are you sure? Because you don't seem like someone who just does their job without thinking." "You're more than that, Zarnath. I can see it in your eyes." Zarnath took a step back, trying to create some distance between them. She had never felt this exposed, this open to another being. She had always been the one in control, the one who held all the power. But Jax was shifting the balance, and she didn't know how to handle it. "I'm not like you, Jax," she said, her voice harder now, as if she were trying to convince herself as much as him. "I'm not human. I don't have the same emotions you do." Jax nodded slowly, as though he understood something she hadn't said. "No, you're not human, but that doesn't mean you don't feel. We all feel, Zarnath. Even you." Zarnath's breath caught in her throat. She had spent so long suppressing her emotions, burying them beneath layers of duty and strength. To admit that she felt, that she could feel, was terrifying. It made her vulnerable. It made her weak. And weakness was something she had been taught to fear above all else. "I feel nothing," she said, trying to convince herself, but the words rang hollow in her ears. Jax's gaze softened, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to hide it from me. I can see it in your eyes. You're struggling." You don't want to kill me, do you? Zarnath's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what to say. For the first time, she was unsure of her own feelings. She didn't know what to feel, what was right or wrong. Her entire existence had been defined by the mission, by the orders she received. But now, standing in front of Jax, the mission didn't seem so clear-cut. I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jax smiled, the expression warm and understanding.
It's okay not to know.
You don't have to have all the answers right away. Zarnath stared at him, torn between the duty she had always known and the strange connection she was beginning to feel. She had never questioned her orders before. But now, in this moment, she wondered if there was more to life than just following commands. Jax stepped even closer, his presence calming. I don't want to fight you, Zarnath. I don't want to kill you. I just want to understand you. I want you to see the world the way I do. It's not about strength or power. It's about kindness. It's about making choices even when they're hard. Zarnath's breath caught in her throat. His words pierced through the walls she had so carefully constructed around herself. She had always believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. But Jax was showing her something different, something she didn't know she needed. She took a deep breath, her pulse racing. And what if I can't choose? What if I'm too far gone to change? Jax placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but grounding. It's never too late to change, Zarnath. You just have to be willing to see things differently. Zarnath closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process everything. She had always thought that her path was set, that her life was predetermined by the Vreen. But now, standing here with Jax, she realized that maybe there was another way. Maybe she could choose something different. I don't know what I want, Zarnath said softly, her voice trembling slightly. But I know I don't want to kill you. Jax smiled, a look of relief washing over his face. Then don't. For the first time in what felt like forever, Zarnath felt a sense of peace. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. Jax had shown her a different way, a way of kindness, of choice, and in that moment, Zarnath realized that she had been given a gift she had never expected, a chance to change, to see the world in a way she never had before. And as the sun began to set on the horizon, casting long shadows over the barren desert, Zarnath stood by Jax's side, ready to take the first step into a new life. Zarnath stood in the middle of the makeshift command post, her fingers twitching nervously as she stared at the screen in front of her. She had never felt so uncertain in her life. Everything she had known, everything she had been taught, seemed to be slipping away. The sharp, precise thoughts that had always guided her actions now felt like distant memories. In their place was a confusion, an uncertainty that gnawed at her insides. Jax was still nearby, sitting on the ground in a corner, his expression calm and relaxed. Despite the alien environment, despite the hostile planet they were on, he seemed unfazed. He was just there, present in a way that made Zarnath uneasy. And yet, she found herself drawn to him, unable to tear her eyes away. It had been days since they had made their pact, the unspoken agreement that she would not kill him, that she would not follow the orders of her superiors. Zarnath had expected that it would be easy to return to her usual self, to fall back into the rigid structure of her life as a Vreen soldier. But instead she found herself constantly questioning her actions, wondering if she had made the right choice. The Vreen were an ancient species, their civilization built on the ideals of strength and conquest. They ruled over countless worlds, spreading their influence across the galaxy. Zarnath had been raised to believe that their way was the only way, that power and domination were the ultimate goals. But Jax, this human, had shown her another side of existence, one that was not about control, not about conquering, but about understanding, compassion, and choice. She glanced over at Jax again. He was sitting with his legs crossed, his eyes closed, breathing deeply as though in meditation. Zarnath had never understood such things. She had always been taught to focus on action, to never let emotions cloud her judgment. And yet, watching him, she began to wonder if maybe there was something to be learned in his calmness, something she had never allowed herself to experience. The silence between them was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence of understanding, of shared space without words. Zarnath was still unsure of how to proceed. She had always been a warrior, always been someone who acted decisively. But now, she found herself at a crossroads. Her training told her to eliminate Jax, to carry out her mission. But her heart, something she had never really listened to before, whispered that there was more to life than following orders. "Zarnath," Jax said suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence like a soft breeze. "You don't have to keep pretending. I can see the conflict in your eyes." Zarnath tensed, her muscles tightening at the sound of his voice. She had never been good at hiding her emotions, especially not from Jax. He seemed to see through every layer of her carefully constructed walls, and it unsettled her. "I'm not pretending," she replied, her voice cold but tinged with uncertainty. "I'm just thinking." Jax smiled, a knowing smile that made Zarnath's heart race. "Thinking about what?" "About what comes next," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "About what I'm supposed to do." Jax's expression softened, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. Empathy, maybe, or something deeper. "You don't have to have all the answers, Zarnath. You've been trained to think in terms of right and wrong, yes or no. But life isn't always that simple." Zarnath's mind raced as she processed his words. She had been taught that there was always a right choice and a wrong choice, that everything in life could be neatly categorized. But Jax was right. Life wasn't simple. There was so much gray in between, so much uncertainty, and that uncertainty was terrifying. "I don't know if I can change," Zarnath admitted, her voice barely audible. "I've been this way for so long. I've lived for the mission, for the orders. I don't know what it means to be anything else." Jax stood up and walked over to her, his movements fluid and graceful. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her, allowing her the space she needed. Zarnath felt the heat of his presence next to her, and for the first time in days she felt a sense of peace wash over her. It was strange, this feeling, like something deep within her was being unlocked, something she had never allowed herself to experience. "You don't have to know everything right away," Jax said softly. "All that matters is that you're open to the possibility of change. It doesn't happen all at once, but every step forward is still progress." Zarnath looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. But all she saw was honesty, a deep sincerity that made her heart ache. She had never known anyone like him, never known anyone who cared so deeply for others, even when they didn't deserve it. "I don't know if I can trust myself," Zarnath said, her voice trembling. "How do I know what's right?" Jax reached out and gently placed his hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture that sent a shockwave through her body. It was a touch filled with compassion, with understanding. She had never experienced anything like it before. "You don't have to trust yourself right now," Jax replied. "Just trust that you're doing the best you can, and know that you don't have to do it alone." Zarnath's breath hitched, and for the first time, she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She quickly blinked them away, not wanting to show weakness. But Jax was there, watching her with such kindness that she couldn't help but feel something shift inside her. "I've spent so long thinking that strength meant shutting everything out," Zarnath said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That being strong meant never showing any weakness. But now I'm not sure." Jax smiled, a warm, reassuring smile that made Zarnath's heart ache. "True strength comes from being vulnerable, Zarnath, from letting yourself feel. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to question everything you've been taught." Zarnath turned her head away, unable to meet his gaze. She didn't want to admit it, but his words were breaking down the walls she had spent so long building. It was as if the very foundation of her identity was crumbling, and she didn't know how to stop it. "I don't know if I can do this," Zarnath said, her voice cracking. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I've been." "You don't have to do it alone," Jax repeated softly. "I'm here, and I believe in you." The words echoed in her mind, and for the first time in her life, Zarnath felt something shift deep inside her. It was like a key turning in a lock, opening up a door she hadn't even known existed. She had always thought of herself as a weapon, as a soldier, but now, for the first time, she felt like she could be something more. For the first time, Zarnath allowed herself to consider the possibility that there might be another path for her. She didn't have to be just a soldier, just a killer. She could be something else. Someone who made her own choices. Someone who was more than the sum of her training. "I don't know what'll happen next," Zarnath said, her voice steady for the first time in days. "But I want to try. I want to see what's beyond the life I've always known." Jax's smile widened, and for the first time, Zarnath felt a sense of relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and she could finally breathe again. "You're not alone, Zarnath," Jax said softly. "You've never been alone." In that moment, Zarnath realized that she had been wrong about everything. She had believed that her strength came from her ability to follow orders, to shut out her emotions and her doubts. But true strength, she now understood, came from the willingness to change, to grow, and to choose a different path. And with Jax by her side, she knew that she could take that first step into a new life. The days that followed were a blur of new experiences for Zarnath. The once rigid, controlled life she had known felt like a distant memory, one she could barely recall. Every action, every decision seemed new. For the first time in her life, she wasn't simply following orders. She was choosing her own path. Zarnath's mind had been a battlefield, constantly torn between the soldier she had always been and the woman she was beginning to become. Jax's presence, his quiet support, had been a constant throughout it all. He had never pushed her, never asked for anything in return. He simply was. And in his calm, patient way, he had shown her that there was more to life than duty and strength. There was the possibility of something else, of compassion, of choice, of peace. But now, as she stood at the edge of the command post, looking out at the horizon, Zarnath felt a decision weighing heavily on her. The Vreen were not a species that allowed failure, and the longer she spent away from her duties, the more dangerous the situation became. Her superiors had been growing impatient, sending frequent messages demanding her report. They wanted results. They wanted Jax dead. And yet, Zarnath had not only spared him, but had begun to question everything she had ever known. For the first time, Zarnath wondered what would happen if she defied the Vreen. She had always believed that loyalty to her people was the highest virtue, but now, standing on the precipice of her decision, she wasn't sure what loyalty truly meant anymore. Loyalty to the Vreen had meant following orders without question, but it had also meant suppressing her own desires, her own understanding of the world. Loyalty to Jax, however, meant something entirely different. It meant choosing kindness, choosing understanding, choosing to act out of compassion instead of fear. Jax approached her, his steps light and unhurried. She didn't need to turn around to know he was there. She could feel his presence beside her, steady and unshaken. He had been her anchor in a storm she hadn't even known she was caught in. And now, as she stood at the edge of everything she had ever known, she felt his steady influence pulling her forward, toward a future she hadn't been able to imagine until recently. "You're thinking again," Jax said, his voice gentle but knowing. Zarnath sighed, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "I can't stop thinking." "It's a good thing," Jax said with a small smile. "It means you're still figuring things out. It means you're still alive, even if it doesn't feel like it." Zarnath finally turned to look at him. His face was relaxed, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made her feel for the first time that she wasn't alone in her struggle. She had been carrying the weight of this decision on her own, convinced that she had to do everything herself. But now she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to. "I don't know what to do," Zarnath admitted, her voice raw with uncertainty. "I've never had to make a decision like this before. I've always followed orders. I've always done what was expected of me. But now, I don't know." Jack stepped closer to her, his gaze steady. "It's okay not to know, Zarnath. You've been told what to do your entire life. Now you get to choose for yourself. It's scary, but it's also freeing." Zarnath took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. "But what if I choose wrong? What if I make a mistake?" "Everyone makes mistakes," Jack said, his voice soft but firm. "What matters is what you do after. You're not alone in this. You've got me, and you've got yourself. That's more than most people ever have." Zarnath's heart clenched at his words. She had never considered that she might have the power to choose, to shape her own future. She had always thought of herself as a tool, an instrument of war. But now, for the first time, she saw the possibility of something else. She saw the possibility of freedom. "I don't know if I can walk away from everything I've known," Zarnath said quietly. "The Vreen, they've been my family, my people. I've been trained to serve them my whole life. And maybe that's what's making this so hard," Jack said gently. "You've spent so much of your life serving someone else's vision, someone else's idea of who you should be. But what do you want to be, Zarnath? What do you want?" Her mind raced as she considered his words. What did she want? For so long she had been defined by her role as a soldier, as a tool of war. But now, for the first time, she realized that she had never stopped to ask herself what she truly desired. She had never considered what her life could be if she wasn't defined by her duty, her mission, her role as a weapon. Zarnath felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her, but beneath it was something else, a glimmer of hope, a spark of something new. She didn't know exactly what her future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She wasn't afraid of the possibility of change. I think I want to choose something else," Zarnath said, her voice trembling with the weight of her decision. "I want to live my own life, not the one someone else has chosen for me." Jax's smile widened, and for a moment, Zarnath felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was hers to make. She wasn't a weapon, a soldier, or a tool anymore. She was a person, with the power to choose her own future. "You don't have to do it alone," Jack said softly. "Whatever you decide, I'll be right here with you." Zarnath nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was fighting against something. She wasn't fighting against the Breen, against Jax, or against herself. She was simply choosing, and that choice, no matter how uncertain, was hers. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, and Zarnath turned to see a group of Vreen soldiers approaching. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she froze. The reality of her decision was crashing down on her. She could feel the weight of the Vreen's expectations bearing down on her once again. But this time, she didn't feel the urge to run, to hide, or to obey. This time, she stood tall, her back straight, and her eyes fixed on the approaching soldiers. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She was something else, a person with the power to choose. The lead soldier stopped in front of her, his gaze cold and calculating. "Zarnath, you've failed in your mission."
"The Vreen will not tolerate failure."
Zarnath met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "I'm not following orders anymore," she said, her voice steady. "I'm choosing my own path." For a moment, there was silence. The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of how to respond. The Vreen had always been a species that valued strength and obedience, but Zarnath had never felt weaker than she did in that moment. And yet, she also felt stronger than she ever had before. She wasn't afraid of their judgment. She wasn't afraid of what they might do to her. She was free. The lead soldier scowled, his expression hardening. "You're making a mistake, Zarnath." Zarnath's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." With that, she turned away from the soldiers and walked toward Jax. He was waiting for her, his calm presence a steady reminder that she wasn't alone. As she reached him, he smiled softly, and together they walked into the unknown future, side by side. Zarnath had made her choice, and for the first time, she knew that whatever happened next, it was the right one.